So welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Simon Dyer, and with Fatima Ashraf, we are the co-creators of Ray of God. Ray seeks to share feminine spiritual wisdom to help realize God in all ways and to align with justice, truth, and beauty. The energetic state of the feminine is our guiding principle and holds our intention. And we believe that all genders hold the feminine and masculine within themselves. While we are women-led and women-centered, we welcome and encourage all genders to join us in creating safer, inclusive spaces. Ray does not seek to present a voice of expertise. We see ourselves as travelers along the way and learning with each step. Our ideas are constantly evolving, and we hope that you will continue to join us on this journey to deeper consciousness. The aim of the festival this year is to encounter, embody, and embrace. And our contributors have been speaking to the broad theme of her body. What is possible when we reconnect with our bodies and begin again to see them and the earth from which they're formed as sacred, regenerative, and holding wisdom? We are blessed to be welcoming over the course of this weekend a diverse array of intergenerational, interspiritual contributors, religious leaders, spiritual teachers, activists, academics, creatives, and so much more. And this weekend is marked by All Saints' Eve and Samhain, the midway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. It's a time to honour the saints, and we hold in our awareness that this weekend there are many friends around the world in ceremony and prayer at the same time that our festival is unfolding. In this heart-to-heart session, we'll be asking our contributors to speak to the theme, and we welcome your questions to be submitted through the chat function to the host. Feel free to ask whatever questions come to your heart, just being mindful that our contributors are also on a journey like each of us and deserve our love and respect, and being willing to share from their hearts in such an open forum. So I'm delighted to introduce our spiriting sheroes for this session. I'd like to start with Rabbi Robyn Ashworth-Steen, who's one of the rabbis at Manchester Reform Synagogue. Robyn was with us last year and we're delighted to welcome her back. She studied at Newnham College, Cambridge, for a degree in Theology and Religious Studies. And after graduating, Robyn worked as a solicitor at a human rights firm in London. Robyn's a passionate social justice activist and a co-founder of Tzelem, the Rabbinic Call for social and economic justice in the UK, and co-chair of Greater Manchester Citizens, a broad-based community organising movement. And she's a chaplain of the One Love team for the universities. Robyn's interested in creating relational, textured, activist communities. Welcome, Robyn. And then we also have Reverend Canon Dr. Rachel Mann. Again, wonderful to be welcoming her back from last year. Rachel is a priest, poet, scholar, broadcaster, and so much more. She is Area Dean of Bury and Rosendale, as well as visiting fellow at the Manchester Writing School. She's the author of only 12 books, and her debut novel, The Gospel of Eve, was published last year to rave reviews. Her latest book of theology, Spectres of God, is being published in November, so do grab that. And also welcoming from across the pond, Melody Moezzi is an Iranian-American Muslim author, attorney, activist, and visiting associate professor of creative writing at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. She's the author of Haldol and Hyacinths, A Bipolar Life, War and Terror, Real Stories of American Muslims, and most recently, The Rumi Prescription, How an Ancient Mystic Poet Changed My Modern Manic Life. Melody's essays have appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, The Washington Post, and myriad other publications. She's also provided commentary for CNN, BBC, NPR, PBS, CSPAN, PRI, and many other radio and television outlets, and we're delighted to have her joining us this year. So, I'd like to start with our opening invitation to all our contributors. And perhaps we could start with Robyn. What does the feminine body mean to you, and how do you encounter this relationship? Thank you, Robyn.
Thanks so much. Oh, my big face on the screen in front of me. I'm going to have it on gallery so I can see everyone's faces who's on the screen. Just delighted to be here. First of all, I just want to say that this space is so beautiful, so well held, and feels so compassionate and lovely. So thank you. This is such a hard question to answer. It's really, really hard my journey of exploring the feminine body has been one of struggle, primarily, I would say, and encounter and beauty, but from a place of struggle. When I was at rabbinic school, we studied for 5 years, and I remember I was having a moment, a dark moment or a struggle over something, in the context I don't remember, and one of my student rabbi, now one of my best friends, said to me, "So where do you feel it in your body?" And I was so confused by the question. I was like, do I have a body? And why is that relevant? Because it's up here. I need to analyze what my issue is. That's the important thing. I did not understand the question, and it's taken me a really long time to start understanding how I can find answers within that. And we know, the usual way of, we find somewhere in our body where it's calm or where it's tense, and we send love to it. And I would say that's my beginning of my journey towards the feminine body, which is to find where the struggle is within me and not stay up in my head, cerebral, intellectual self, but to really be in the struggle or the calm of my body. I'd say for me, how I encounter this in this moment, where I am at the moment in my life, and this is very particular. That's my kind of caveat about this. It's very personal and particular. It's not how everyone will encounter the feminine body or what it means. But for me, it's very much about creativity and destruction at the moment. That's how I'm encountering it. With a particular history of fertility and infertility, I've really felt that within my body of what that feels like to be able to create, and also how my body can destroy. So really feeling that very powerfully, and the pain of that, and the realization that I can't escape my body through it, that I'm brought back into my body all the time as a woman. But I think also, so that's the kind of very physical. It's also, we were talking about this before, weren't we, Simon? It's not physical and emotional, but that kind of sense of the fertility, the health stuff, maybe. But also I experience the feminine body through creativity and destruction to do with how I find space for my creativity in my life and my work. I know that to be a content, grounded person, I need space for my creativity. But so often I destroy that space that I need for myself by overworking all the narratives that we all live by, that society constructs for me, of being productive, of putting other people's needs before mine, of only my value being worth what I can do and produce. And so often the space I know I need for creativity, and how I understand my feminine body and how that fuels it, that when I've been able to have space for creativity, I feel better, for want of a better word. I just feel good. I feel grounded. I'm a better person. I'm a nicer person. I enjoy life. I see life. I'm awakened to it. So often I can destroy that and cut off my ability to access it through that. So at the moment, those are things that come to mind when I think about my encounter with the feminine body, around creativity and destruction. And the very simple step, I feel like I'm a beginner sometimes, of where is it in my body? Oh yeah, I have a body. What's that? And then all the dichotomy, the difference of that, of always being reminded that I have a body. So being brought back into it. So those are some initial thoughts that I'm sure will change completely within our conversation or be brought out more. But there's a beginning kind of reflection.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you won't be the only person, absolutely. As we're going through, even the questions, I was thinking to myself earlier today, I thought, oh, I think I want to tweak, and I want to change those, I want to tweak those. And I know that this, the 3 contributors that we have, you're all easy with that. So I felt very comfortable. But moment by moment, absolutely, as our bodies are changing, and as one of the other contributors yesterday was saying, our cells are constantly replenishing. We are not who we were, when we were born last week, a moment ago. an hour ago when I was doing the yoga workshop with Sophia. I'm not the same person now. So thank you so much. And I mean, immediately you just kind of came out and kind of struck me in my heart with your phrase of being in the struggle and calm of the body, right? This constant, the world separates struggle. You can either be in struggle or you can be in calm, but it doesn't allow for this constant flux. And I feel like that's a very feminine way of being, to hold all the differences and be comfortable going through them, even if they're challenging. So thank you so much. Rachel, my dear, same question.
Thank you, Saima. Gosh, I'm not sure I have anything much to add, really. I guess one thing that's true for me, that's very much been part of my story, my journey, is discovering a journey into what we might call the feminine body or a feminine body. For those of you who don't know, I spent the first 20 years of my life being coded as male. I'm a trans woman. I transitioned in my early 20s, and there's a sense in which that transition very much foregrounded a whole bunch of realities about how bodies are experienced, are read, are lived and understood, depending on how we are seen by others, but of course how we see ourselves and how we live ourselves. And I think that as someone who is trans, who's transitioned, who knows very much about this idea of mutability, this thing that to be human is to be mutable, is to be changeable, to be in flux. I think that there is something profoundly joyous and wondrous about that. Of course, mildly terrifying, but the feminine horizon for me is, and I made this little note as you were praying, actually, Simon. Sorry, for making little note. For me, an encounter with the feminine body is learning to love and live the body that is unafraid of bodies, because she, the feminine horizon in ourselves, knows that there's nowhere else to go and be. And I think that as someone who was formed in what I would call a Western European philosophical tradition, my first academic life and career was in philosophy, and it was very, very blokey and very macho, and also it was very heady, and it was all about argument. There was this sort of sense, this absolute terror of the reality of bodies, our fragility, our precariousness, our strange and beautiful gift for making and creating, but also this awful power of our grubby hands, you know, to destroy and unmake. But for me, because I think at the heart of the feminine is something that is profoundly bodily, and has of course often been coded in such a negative way, you know, has been objectified, has been seen as lesser, as negative, to the point where, you know, in the Western philosophical tradition, it's all about minds, because that's what blokes are into, men are into. And therefore sort of trying to create this distance between themselves and the body, which is coded as feminine and changeable and dangerous and problematic, to dare to inhabit the truth of our precariousness is, for me, is this sort of extraordinary encounter with the wonder and delight of as I think you said, Saima, the femininity which is within all of us, is part of all of us, but which so often we're trained, whether we're trans or cis, you know, male, female, straight, queer, to treat with suspicion. I'm minded that actually in language itself there is this this beautiful engagement with bodies that we aren't attentive to. I'm conscious that, you know, we have a rabbi in our company, so who's going to be an expert in Hebrew, but memory tells me that the Hebrew for compassion is womb. And equally in Greek, which is a language I know much better, the splagna, meaning gut, is the word for compassion. And so our compassion is deeply embodied, and to dare to embrace that body is to embrace the feminine in ourselves.
Rachel, you always leave me speechless, which is why I got Fatima to do the session last year. But I thought I would be brave and to do it this year. Thank you so much. If people didn't know, just from hearing you speak, they would know that you are a poet. I love the phrases. I mean, everything. I just want to write everything down, and at the same time, I just want to savor them. But I love this phrase, feminine horizon. That's such an amazing way to approach, that she's coming, she's rising and is always ever present. And wherever we are in the world, there's a horizon occurring, right? If we would just pay attention, if we would just reorient our direction. And it reminds me of the Islamic, to kind of orienting ourselves toward prayer. And she is always ever present. So beautiful, thank you. And the awful power of our grubby hands, that really hit me. This sense of we're claiming our bodies and we try to do beauty. And personally, sometimes I don't realize the harm I'm causing, that there is this awful power that we embody, no matter what kind of body we have. And that can be usually to our loved ones. And yet if we can come and connect in that space. Yeah, thank you. Oh, Melody.
Thank you so much. Oh, my whole big face. Hold on, let me gallery this. I don't like seeing that, but I just showed how I feel about just the body and gender and the idea of gender to begin with, and to follow Robyn and Rachel. I don't think I'm nearly as evolved as either one of you as a human in a body quite yet. But I loved what Robyn had to say about this struggle, which is a Muslim I interpret as jihad, which is constant within, but also just for me, feminine, masculine, non-binary, like the body is a fucking distraction. Like I'm still stuck there, and it's still a betrayal of my soul, and my body and mind have, and I consider that integrated in one and the same, but like my body has betrayed me in many ways. It is also a blessing in that it carries me through this world, which also feels like a betrayal in a lot of ways, but not to be cynical and like harsh, but I really just feel when I was a teenager, I had a pancreatic tumor that nearly killed me. And the reaction to everyone else around me toward that, and like the helplessness of just like, and it's such an ugly little organ on your upper left quadrant, and like that it could cause so much damage that it could kill me. And then separately, I have bipolar disorder. So years later, and those things to me are deeply connected. Years later, I developed bipolar after a surgery that rerouted my intestines, which again, connected to the brain. All of that. And in a way, my brain also, it betrayed me again, but in betraying me, I had a mystical experience, which I had never had before. So I was able to escape myself, selfness, my body in general for a brief moment. And it became so deeply inconvenient in this reality that I was hospitalized. I went manic, I had a psychotic episode. I think I had access to a different realm of reality that is impossible to live in here. It's the realm where the self is connected to every other self, which is great and beautiful. And I write about Rumi and he loves it. Can't live in the world that way, like consistently, always. You would, I mean, and I don't doubt that someone like Rumi or Maulana, as we know him, would be hospitalized as well. But anyway, I have a lot of resentment for gender and body and a lot of that still. So that's why I say I'm just not quite as evolved as the rest of you there. And I'm learning a lot listening to you, and I'm grateful to you on that end. But again, like, not to say that I'm not, Rumi has a poem where he says, Danish tonushbin, and see the nourishment in the poison, right? Like, and that's how I see all kinds of bodies, whether feminine, masculine, or non-binary, is it's a niche and a noosh. It nourishes us, and it's a niche. It's a toxic, poisonous thing. And it's our job to danish tonushbin. In the niche, see the noosh. In the sting, see the nourishment. And that's not always an easy thing as a human, but that's sort of where I'm coming from this at.
Thank you so much, Melody. Yeah, there's so much that resonates with Maulana Rumi. It's also a tradition that I follow, and his words about the body. I remember, you'll know the chickpea story, of course. The chickpeas boiling in the pot, and the cook is hitting them and telling them to, like, boil nicely now. Stop trying to jump out of the pot. And I was going through issues with my body. And my husband would always, say to me, just, tell me this story. I remember after the umpteenth time of hearing it, I was like, enough already. I'm fed up. I don't want to be the chickpea anymore. I don't want to be the cook. I'm done with the boiling. And I remember it was real frustration, and yet at the same time there is that real reassurance also. If you can be open and receptive to it. But there was moments of where I could do that, and the rest of the time there's a lot of frustration. But I hope we can speak more about your interpretations of Maulana Rumi's poetry, which I think will be wonderful. So we're connecting a little bit to tradition, bringing up Rumi. So the second inquiry that I wanted to ask you about is, how does your tradition help you to embody the sacred in your life? And how has it helped you to connect with your body? And are there any aspects of your tradition that you understand differently through the lens of the sacredness or the challenges of your body? And maybe Rachel, if I could ask you to go first.
There we go. Right. I think can you hear me? Right. I think I'm unmuted now. Gosh. Yes. I mean, where I want to start is with an acknowledgement that my tradition, Christianity, very particularly the Church of England, if you spent more than a few minutes reading elements of the Gospels, of the letters of Paul, many people would say, oh gosh, Christianity, it's got this terrible, terrible downer on the body. And St. Paul in particular talks about flesh and how flesh effectively needs to be conquered. And I have to say, I was someone who had to put a lot of work in, I think, to get to a point where I began to really appreciate just how embodied Christianity is. Again, it's very dangerous for me in the company of a rabbi and a Muslim scholar to make generalizations, but in my head, I think of Islam and Judaism as very embodied traditions. I'd be very interested to see what's said about that. Whereas Christianity is, what do you believe? And we have these big long creeds that we say, I believe in God the Father, etc., etc., etc. But there is this immense gift at the very heart of the Christian faith, which is you know, what I would call the Eucharist, or, you know, the Mass, Holy Communion, which is about feasting on the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And a reminder that actually to be a Christian is to be someone who is committed to community, to indwelling, to dwelling with others and breaking bread and sharing wine. You know, as a tradition that I think, you know, we've so often Christianity has sort of seen itself as somehow, you know, better than Judaism. I mean, the absolute horror and offensiveness of that. You know, there is a sense in which we, as St. Paul says, we're a little grafted shoot into a much deeper and richer embodied tradition that's always known the power of food and relationship and community. And for me, to be a body is to be a body in the midst of other bodies, and to be part of this body of Christ, which is about a community which gathers ultimately around a table. No matter how sacralized, go into a church and there'll be candles and incense and choir singing. Ultimately, this comes down to people who 2,000 years ago gathered around a table and broke bread together and shared wine outpoured, and wanted to say that they were somehow dwellers in the body of God. And for me, that is this just profound reminder of being embodied first. But of course, at the same time, there are all sorts of pernicious elements to that. Women have traditionally been treated as second rate in so much of Christianity. There have been all sorts of edicts against queer and different bodies, disabled bodies, ill bodies in Christianity. But I come back again to two things. I mean, one is the mother of God, Mary, the mother of Jesus, the Blessed Virgin, who, of course, has been so sacralized and you know, seen as this sort of cleaned up plasterboard figure, but who is a young woman who said yes to God, and was and is the Theotokos, the God bearer, the one who bears God in her body, in her womb, in the sight of compassion, who brings together the holy and the embodied, this air and this earth. But of course, Jesus himself is one who, and I'm not going to lie to you, I struggle in some ways with the violence that is associated with Christ's suffering. But there is also something really powerful for me about this, the Christ who is risen, but who bears the marks of woundedness, who bears the scars. And as someone who's disabled myself, who has had multiple surgeries, whose body is deeply scarred as a result of huge amounts of surgery on my abdomen, who has a permanent stoma, and, you know, as I'm speaking, you know, I'm sorry if this is a bit grim, but, you know, I mean, shit is just coming out of my body all of the time because I have no means of controlling that. And that solidarity I find in God's body, which is raised to glory, but never loses those marks of hurt and pain and human reality and suffering. So for me, in summary, Christianity offers just this immensely deeply embodied reality, but it's taken me a lot of digging and a lot of work as a feminist and as a queer theologian to get there.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Yeah, this is just touching so much upon this theme that came out of last year as well, about this, why do we have to separate the pure from the sensual? Why do we have to put Virgin Mary on a pedestal and denigrate Mary Magdalene? That why can we not combine the two and allow space for everything to exist? And I love this holy and embodied, air and earth. Again, this integration, this constant flowing, which, again, coming back to the theme, I feel the feminine in her body. And again, when we say feminine and her body, these are energetic understandings, whichever type of body you are, whatever you identify as, we can connect to this. But it's that giving us permission to hold all the messiness of life, and actually to learn to realize that the mess is also sacred as well. And I really hope that we can, come back to this idea of the body and the way we relate to the body in terms of sacredness, touching upon your book, Gospel of Eve. So hopefully we'll come back to that toward the end as well. Robyn, would you like to speak to the same?
I don't know, I'm still processing everything. I don't think I've ever heard Rachel someone explain the suffering of Jesus and God's body in quite that way. I found it quite profound, and there's a lot that I need to sit with there. Yeah, so I'm really grateful for both Melody and Rachel and your honesty and sharing, very personally where you're at as well. It's very moving. So let me kind of talk about the Jewish story, or where I fit within the Jewish story. I'm particularly thinking, when you asked this question, Simon, about Eve, creation, obviously, the creation of Adam, the first person, and certainly within the Hebrew in the text, it's a person that is of no gender. It's a very confused gender. It's both, it's none, it's everything. The Hebrew is fascinating. So Adam was made from the earth, Adamah. So, we are the same as the earth. We are bodies connected to the earth. That is what we are. And, a couple of verses later, it's plants that grow from the earth. So that really deep connection, thinking about the climate, obviously, particularly at the moment, very intimate connection. And Judaism is, as Rachel said, like so embodied, at least how we practice it. Like there's almost nothing that isn't done physically, either with food or ritual objects. And yet the distance that I can find, even as a female rabbi, between that and me is vast. Almost everything in that embodied experience has been withheld, or I've been betrayed. I love that, Melody, and that anger, because like literally everything. Food, right? We eat certain foods. We fast at the Day of Atonement. My body in terms of food is so messed up, disordered eating, being thinner, trying to have less space, being happy with my body. What does that mean? All of that stuff. So food is already, there's a distance, it's been denied. And, even if we go back to the creation story in Eve was created from the rib. So the interpretation, say, of Adam, really it was the side of Adam. So even the interpretation from the beginning has been a separation of woman from earth and from power as well. And very much like Melody, I want to be like Lilith, who the rabbinic interpretation say was the first woman. I just want to run away. My most oft imagination, I would say I'd think about this at least once a day, is to just go off and live by the sea in Scotland. I just don't want I don't want to be in the messiness of community, because community is not kumbaya, because it's full of other bodies and they're really complicated. So most often I'm just I don't want to be in the fight. Exactly as Simon was saying, I just don't want to be the chickpea. I'm actually better off being in Scotland by myself with my books. That's where I want to be. I want to read about community. I don't want to be in it. I want to read about bodies and theology. I don't want to have to live it. The tradition I come from, which is progressive Judaism, was very rational. It was all about a theology where, as Rachel said, do you believe in God, right? Do you believe what you're reading in your text? They cut out loads of the embodied stuff. So we didn't process the Torah scrolls. We didn't kiss the Torah scrolls as part of our service. They took all of that away, even wearing a talit, the prayer shawl, all of it. And we're now having a real kind of coming back into it and a reclamation of it. But as I said, as a woman with that, it's complicated. And I was so angry when I came to Manchester, which is like more conservative in the Jewish world. And realised I was a woman for the first time when I came as a female rabbi, because people kept telling me. I was like, oh, so I am a woman then, because they just kept pointing it out. And one of the things was, I remember being on a plane going to Israel, which is a whole other complicated story I'm not going to get into. And I was wearing my kippah, as I do every day. And someone was saying, oh, and this is how I connect very deeply to my spirituality. They said it's fine that women wear it. I think it's a bit weird, though, because actually I don't think it suits a woman's head. It suits a man's head more. And I was so confused. I went into the toilet and I was like, does it not look right on my head? And then I was like, oh, no, that was a rubbish comment. It was stupid. But what happens then is I realised very deeply that feminist mantra that the personal is political. That actually every act I have as a Jew, as a female Jew, and this, counts for any other, exactly like people with disabilities, if you're queer, like it's not just about being a woman, but this is my particular experience, is that. So I try and habit that the personal is political. That's my act in it. This is what my tradition gives me. We've got the mikveh, like a ritual bath that is just a gorgeous thing. Again, denied to women, or like a way of controlling women's body. Now a chance to deeply be with my body and embrace every single nook and cranny of it. That's definitely part of it. And also to very deeply be in the feelings. So I'll end on this point because I feel I could go on just because I've been inspired by what everyone's been saying. This thing of not, I think, therefore I am. And I was reminded of this when Rachel was speaking as well. But Audre Lorde writes, I feel, therefore I am. So really trying to remember that I don't have to prove anything intellectually. I don't need to say I believe in, all the arguments for the existence of God or why we do things Jewishly or anything. It's just like I feel. Like I wear a kippah because I feel it all. Like it helps me to connect more and to explain things through that. So I have loads more to say, but I'm going to have to stop myself because I'm going to just carry on going and I want to hear from everyone else.
Robyn, thank you so much. This is why we need more time, because we do need to just continue going. There is so much. I could also just say so much to what you've shared, but I think I'm going to let Melody speak, and then maybe there'll be resonances to it as well. So please do, Melody.
Unmute myself. Hey, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think all of us here probably think that things happen and connections are made for a reason, and that the three of us are together on this particular panel, and all our guts are the way that they are. It's so cool to me, and it makes me think of in Farsi the word gut and heart is the same, del. And Rumi has a poem where he says hamdeli az hamzabani behtar ast, which is it's better to be of the same heart than of the same tongue. So I think what all of us are talking about is different tongues, different religions, same heart. So I don't want to talk too much because I want to be able to interact with the three of us. What all of you have said, like what both of you have said and what Simon has added have been so great that I just sort of want to be quiet and digest it in my horribly mixed up gut. And in my heart too, because it's been beautiful what you've shared, and I just want to have time to interact as well. So I'm going to step back.
Thank you, Melody. Yeah, I love that, the gut and the heart, right, being the same, and I feel like this is connected again to this idea of it's so separated, right? The gut is seen as something, yeah, we don't want to connect with that. It's a bit grubby, it's a bit, messy. The heart, yes, that must be, we must polish it. It must shine with light. But it can only shine because there's some kind of covering over it, right? Otherwise, we just wouldn't know light because it would be like air. We don't see it. And Robyn, what you said, it brought this idea of the personal is political. Intersectionality, why is it only referred to women and those that are different? You don't hear about men needing to give themselves, I'm intersectional, I'm A and B and C and D and XYZ too. They can just be. But this intersectionality comes about because people started saying to you, oh, you're a woman and you're a rabbi. And yeah, the whole Kippur story, my goodness, just complete facepalm. But again, this constant reminders that we are moving through this world, and God forbid for a moment we might forget who we are, because somebody will remind us, or there will be an interaction that will really highlight something that either makes us feel unsafe or makes us stick out and be self-conscious. And again, the theme from last year was her space, which again is huge and vast. And how do we occupy space as people that identify as women in the world and are perceived as women? And then coming down to her body, again, so vast. How do we hold, ourselves as we move through this world in these bodies? And Robyn, you spoke about this last year as well, and you said again about trying to be small, but also kind of psychologically making ourselves small so that we can navigate without making too many waves. And then coming to this space where I feel I'm coming to now, which is we each have a purpose. The divine has given us a purpose, and that may be small and may not make ripples, but it might make huge ripples. But the only way we're going to find out is by trying, is by jumping in, right? And taking up the space and putting our bodies out there, however they may be shaped. So yeah, just thank you so much. I'm gonna kind of do the final question, and then maybe that can open up just to a dialogue between all of us. And so that was, how can we embrace our connection to the earth and to our bodies to help create a deeper connection to the divine? And what challenges, horrific, beautiful, however, that we've experienced, have helped us, if they have helped us, to have a deeper connection to the divine? And maybe Rachel could start that.
I'm out of practice at unmuting myself. Gosh. I'm like, I feel like a scratched record in some ways, but I think what's been really important for me to have this sort of sense of being of earth, of being earthed, and yet somehow having this divine breath, ruach, this spirit of God, is by daring to go to the place that is really difficult. I've already talked a bit about having no colon and having had lots of surgery and being someone who's really close to my own refuse. And there is we instinctivly have a horror of sewage. I mean, gosh, there's been a lot of talk in the UK about sewage recently, but it smells, it's unseemly, it's dangerous, it can make us unwell. We can see how religious traditions and cultures create these taboos and these purity cultures and leave us as embodied beings, as bodies, terrified of our bodies because they so readily decay and fall apart. And it takes very little for us to be punctured so completely that life departs. But for me, seeking to, and you can hear I'm struggling here because I'm talking about stuff that is both very personal, but also feels really difficult to articulate. For me, being able to say that having a stoma, in other words, basically a bit of my gut permanently exposed to the world that has to be covered up with a bag. Being able to say that stoma is gift and is a place of hallowing, and dare I say it, of hope, has been a massive shift for me. And I think I need to acknowledge something here, that I you know, recognizing the intersectional, nonetheless, I am an immensely privileged person. And so when I talk about saying I feel blessed, or I have this gift of stoma, this gift of wound, of being present to my own shit and refuse and blood on a daily basis, I'm speaking from a place of great privilege as a white middle class educated person who is a representative of the established church of England. But nonetheless, to be able to say that that which signals my fragility is also a sign of blessing seems to me a bold move and a holy move. You know, holy, if that refers to wholeness, wholeness for me is about saying that the feminine body is the body which basically, you know, to come back to where I started from, it's unafraid of the reality of bodies. The reality of bodies is that they're not this fantastical image that's sold us by capitalism or consumerism. It's not this idealized feminine body that, you know, has got curves in particular places and boobs that are of a particular size that's determined by, well, God knows whom, but not by us, not by me, not by you. The divine is most alive in what we actually are. And for me, the resource for that is, it comes back to my Christian belief and faith, which is the God who dares to empty him, her, their self into an actual body that it is not an exceptional body, actually, is a real body, the body of a rabbi speaking into a culture that that was dominated by a great imperial power, who lived his life in a province that was of no note to the Romans, really. And there's just something extraordinarily incredible about the holiness of the particular body, of the God, of the divine, who dwells in us, in half-healed, troubled, puzzled, bewildered, but most of all, actual bodies, trying to make sense of this strange world.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to move on and ask Robin if she's able to speak.
Just about able to speak for a moment, and then I'm going to lie down. I'm actually going trick and treating with my son. I don't know how I'm going to get through this because I'm just going to be kind of in my body and all this stuff. I'm actually just going to speak to where Rachel's words just took me. I was just quickly looking on my phone for something. One of my teachers, Rabbi Sheila Shulman, Zichron Levrach, which means may her memory be for a blessing. She passed away just over 5 years ago now. And there's something very much that Rachel's just brought her spirit to me. Anyway, and there's this idea that bodies being flesh and blood, and that idea of the world that we live in, the capitalist world that we live in, whatever the patriarchal world we live in, trying to kind of bring us away from the body always, away from death, sanitizing mortality and death, not allowing us to be close to it, pretending, selling us a lie that you can cheat death in every single way, right? And all of that stuff. And it kind of made me think of Rabbi Sheila's words, and how that can stop us hearing the call, the divine voice. In Hebrew, we say bat call, the daughter's voice. God's voice is called a bat call, a female voice, the daughter of a voice, right? So how we can be stopped by hearing that voice because of this separation. I hope that makes sense, but it's something that I'm just kind of like playing about with at the moment. And she wrote this, that she had an encounter with a Benedictine nun who became her friend. When I told her, she wrote many years ago, about what it meant for me to be a lesbian and a radical feminist, when I said, in effect, we have to change the world, she told me that I was in a prophetic position. That's the back call, right? Someone telling her, you're a prophet, you've got something, you can change the world. Sheila writes, I was so surprised. I thought she said that I was in a pathetic condition. Once I got over the shock of what she really said, it stayed with me, though I didn't know what to do with it. And that really reminded me of like the way that we're separated from our bodies. We can hear the pathetic. I mean, I hear that every day, all the time. You shouldn't be a rabbi, you're not a proper rabbi, you're not a proper mum, you're not a proper this, you're not doing that right, you never did that right, you'll never get it right. Like that pathetic voice I can hear. The prophetic, that call, is really hard to hear, like those lifting of divine sparks as well. So the two things I'm going to just end on, because I want to get into dialogue, is where we started in the Jewish calendar, which is all about agriculture, and it's all about the moon. It's all about earth and body, really. Although we're disconnected to it again in this world, because in biblical times, you lived by your bodies, you lived by the land. Disconnection now. But we've just started the 7th year of a 7th cycle of years. That makes sense. 7 years, we're in the 7th, and that's a Shemitah year, which is the land of fallowness, really. They would leave swathes of land to be fallow so that the needy could come and take what they needed. Debts were cancelled, and it was a real time for things to be fallow so that things could grow, basically. We don't live agriculturally like that anymore. But I've been playing around, and this was the question, Simon, when you asked it initially, and it's still with me, and I've still got a question around it. Like, what does that offer us? And I'm still trying to work out what I'm going to leave fallow and let go of this year, this Shemitah year, so that things can grow, and what that looks like. And I'm pretty sure it has stuff around my body or my relationship to it, around death as well, and about illness. I feel a great privilege in a different way that Rachel was talking about, though super privileged, but the privilege of being a community rabbi and the pain is being alongside people in illness, being around death a huge amount. And that always turns me back into life. It always helps me live my life more fully and how to choose it. And I'm always amazed when people say, a woman I visit regularly who has Parkinson's said, she's got to the point on some days where she can say she's glad she got Parkinson's because it made her a nicer person. And I'm just astonished by that. And when people have said to me in my thesaurus, in my problems, you know, you can find beauty in the pain, I just want to tell them to F off. Like, pardon, that's not helpful. I don't need to hear that. Yet I know I can get there myself. So it's like a theology, I get it because I want it and I can feel it sometimes. But when other people tell me, it does not feel good to me about myself, I mean. So to me, like the Shemitah year is something that I'm going to play with around this. And also liturgy and prayer being a container for me of lots of different mantras, lots of things that help me in dark moments. Like I had very minor surgery recently, came out and said one of these prayers of just being a person in this world and gratitude for being in a body. That prayer particularly is a morning blessing about that. So playing with mantras and music and this idea of time and the fallowness and emptiness and being in that as well.
Thank you so much, Robyn. Yeah, again, so many connections that I think I'm going to come back to that and maybe let Melody speak next.
Thank you so much. Wow. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you. I think about, for me, and you mentioned I'm from across the pond, here in the US, we use solitary confinement as a kind of treatment and a kind of punishment. And I have experienced it as a treatment for mental illness. I have experienced it for about 24 hours. Cruel, unusual, insane, absurd to use as a treatment. There's a lot of, I'm sure many of you know, there's a lot of data to show that it actually causes symptoms of mental illness in people who don't already have mental illness. So it's a horrifying kind of treatment. And I compare it in my second book to using laxatives to treat diarrhea, which is what it is. It's separating somebody not only from the earth, but from other people. And so the beginning of, I think, connecting to the earth has to do with connecting with other people. And so living in a country where we in the United States use solitary confinement more than any other country on the planet, despite the fact that we know that it's not just ineffective at treatment and punishment, but actually counterproductive. I didn't have to spend a lot of time there to realize this is the most cruel thing that you can do to a human body and soul, is to put them in the moment of greatest crisis in a room alone with no windows. And I had the benefit of having been hospitalized for this pancreatic tumor for even a month at a time at a young age. There was always a window. There were always books. There was always music. When you take windows, I mean, not even windows, like you can't go outside. One of the facilities where I wasn't in solitary in this facility, but I was in a locked, I've been in 3 separate locked facilities, which is miraculous that this is what we do to the mystics in our society, because I don't think that I had a mystical experience in spite of my bipolar diagnosis. I think it was because of it. And I don't disagree that I need medication. I have a clinical condition that requires medication. I recognize it as medical. I would never encourage somebody to stop taking their medication. This is a miraculous kinds of medications we have now, and I'm so grateful for all of them. I also think that I'm spiritually gifted. I think that there are other people with my condition, with other psychiatric conditions that we don't understand, and other sort of neurodiverse individuals who are spiritually gifted, and we throw them away, and in the worst possible way. And so for me, this is where, again, that struggle comes back to where we started, and that struggle and that jihad of, I couldn't do anything to get myself out of any of those facilities. I couldn't do anything as a lawyer. I was watching civil rights violations, human rights violations inside these facilities against me and other people. And there was nothing I could do, no one I could call. And to recognize that those of us who are on the outside of that, what a gift it is, and to use it. Those of us who have a little credibility, a little privilege, a little something, to use that to help other people who are locked in. And not everyone is physically locked in. Some people are spiritually locked in. Some people are emotionally locked in for whatever reasons. But the literal one, the prisons, the psychiatric facilities, the places where you cannot get out of, to try and do whatever we can to reach out to those people is also to reach into our own hearts, because it's the common humanity that connects us. And ultimately, it may sound weird to say to reconnect with the earth, go to the place that is least earth, like go to these locked places and do what you can to get people out and to help them in whatever way you can. Because having been one of those people and knowing how powerless I was in that moment, despite all the privileges I had to get out, and knowing that there are people who can spend 20, 40, 50 years in similar conditions, makes me think that that's what all of us need to be doing, and that's how we can reconnect with the earth. Aside from, go barefoot, yeah, like you can walk outside barefoot, great, that's very literal, but I think this other kind of connecting with the earth that feels very much the opposite could connect us more, not only to the earth, but to one another and to the divine within ourselves and one another.
Thank you so much, Melody. Just absolutely beautiful. And I think that's such an important point. You know, when we talk about the earth and nature, you know, some people are like, well, you're lucky, you know, I live in a high-rise flat in the middle of, you know, a city. But exactly as you say, it's not about being privileged, you know, or actually, you know, a lot of people live in nature and they have very difficult lives and they may not see what they have there and they're looking for something else. But it's about connecting to it within yourself. And, you know, I was just really struck by Robyn about what you said about letting go, you know, and looking at this year, the 7th year of what it means to you. And Fatima was encouraging me to let go and have courage and share more about my journey. And I did that recently. You know, this month, in fact, I claimed that I can actually say that I have a dynamic disability. And it took me a while to come to a point where I could say, yes, this is, you know, it doesn't define me. And it's not exactly a label, but it's a way that I can accept navigating through the world in this body. That for the last decade, I feel has been, sometimes feel like it's letting me down, you know, when I'm feeling very frustrated and my voice is shaking, but I'm going to continue going. And exactly like what you said, Robyn, you know, people can say, oh, it's such a blessing. And I just want to whack them over the head with that ladle that the cook had, right? I can absolutely see the blessings that have come out of, you know, having a dynamic disability. But that doesn't mean I can't be allowed the space to also be incredibly frustrated with God, you know, saying, okay, God, what is it you want from me? And can't you just make it really clear? Can't you just give me a really loud dream that says, do this? And there was one experience where, you know, I was like in real darkness, like I felt like I fell into the abyss. And it was maybe the first time I had really cried out to the divine. You know, it was just absolute, you know, like, where are you? And I felt her. And at that time, I wouldn't have said her. I felt it. I felt something encompass me and carry me up. I felt lifted. And I remember when I came back to consciousness, I'd been, you know, my legs had given way, and I found myself, you know, my husband had carried me into bed. So there was this outer literal manifestation of being carried, but there was this inner connection. And I can absolutely say in that moment, I would have said, I don't want this. I don't want to have experienced this. But after time, as I was able to process it, it was such a pivotal moment for me. And this process of accepting what we go through with our bodies, with our minds, with our hearts, again, it's this constantly, you know, fluctuating ebb and flow of every time I think I've accepted, something will arrive and I'm like, holy hell, no, I haven't. You know, there's so much more to go. But then all these experiences, you know, being in hospital, probably being too high on drugs, and the nurses were literal angels. Like I was just saying, thank you so much for what you do. And then other experiences of feeling like, oh, I'm in hell. This is hell. I'm experiencing hell. And then after that, thinking, wow, wasn't that amazing? I had an experience of hell while I was conscious and in this form. And Melody, you know, you've spoken before. This is what really struck me. I heard one of your talks online, and you spoke about something can be clinical and spiritual. And I feel like this is such an important conversation that we need to be having. Every single human being has some kind of challenge, right? There is no othering. There's no box for healthy people and then a box for people that have mental or physical, you know, challenges, it's a spectrum. And at some point we're going to go through this, and if we're lucky, we have the support system, whether that's either through other people or whether we are on this, this cabin in the Scottish Islands by ourselves. We have nature, we have her responding back to us and carrying us through. So I just want to open this up, to all of you, to anything that may have come up. I'd also like to come back to speaking to Rachel about the body through her novel as well, but please do just feel free to unmute yourselves. And to friends who are listening, please do share your reflections in chat. We can all see.
I just come back on Melody's, what I experienced as a profound call to action. I really found a thread, which is obviously where Melody was talking to from our conversations, this sense of, I feel like I've been reflecting on, I think we've all been speaking to what it is, this feminine body of feeling. And, we've all shared, particularly you three, like very visceral experiences of what that is to be in the body, the feminine body. And if we are feeling in the way that we are, and we understand that our role maybe is to be in the world and in the body rather than escaping to wherever, but like actually doing it. If you're in the feminine body, you cannot ignore the cries from humanity. Like, you're just unable to do it, because it doesn't mean that you can go to a cave and go and live a life of a hermit. You have to hear, and they should be shattering cries that we hear, that we have to act upon. And in, certainly Judaism, the main story that we have, that we remember in every single moment, is that of the Exodus, which is the liberation from our inner and the outer pharaohs, like the real pharaohs, the dictators, the horrors of solitary confinement, the horrors I saw as a human rights lawyer about deaths in custody of young black men. All of these things are Egypt. In Hebrew, it's Mitzrayim, which is narrow places. All of it is about liberation. And liberation isn't a kumbaya term, it's like real. Like, there are specific things we can do for liberation for individuals and for people. So it's really helpful for me to hear that. And for me, spirituality and the political are like this. They're not separate to it. My spiritual life enables me to have the strength to be political, and it inspires me to do that. So just grateful for that call to action.
I just maybe just riff on that a little, because that really sort of sparked something in me, Robyn, just about the unavoidability of the world, because I, like you, I often think, gosh, if I could just get away. And I've just finished a week away in a friend's deck house where I've managed to have a bit of space. But the thing is that the space itself is relational and takes us deeper. I mean, two thoughts on that. One is a friend of mine, a former spiritual director of mine who's now died. He spoke about a friend of his who was a hermit, a female hermit in North Wales, and he'd go and see her, and she'd been a hermit for years and years. No radio, no TV, no newspapers, and he would say, well, what do you pray about? And she would say, you know what to pray about, because the world makes itself available to you. That to be alone is not to be separated. It's somehow to be more deeply embedded. And again, at the risk of making myself look a bit foolish here, because I'm a terrible Hebrew scholar, but the Hebrew for salvation is about spaciousness, yasha. It's this sort of wideness, and that sense of when we're in places of where we can breathe. The promised land, that spacious place, is deeply relational. It's not just about the community of bodies and people of which we're part, but it's a place where we can breathe in truth and reality and God's demand for justice and mercy and action, and we breathe out. I mean, again, how embodied is that? There's no separation. So thank you, Robyn, for inspiring me to think a little bit more deeply about that. Thank you.
I just wanted to see if Jenny would like to, she had her hand raised. Jenny, please do feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just really wanted to say thank you so very much. And I was here listening to Rachel and to Robyn last year, and what you shared last year has travelled with me through this year. And a particular thank you because I have to go and write an essay on what should Christian attitudes to other faiths be for my theological training at Christmas. And RAYfest has more or less written the essay for me. And Robyn, you mentioned last year your inner Baba Yaga, which led me to discover my own. My husband might be less grateful to you for me discovering my inner Baba Yaga, but the wisdom and the how safe this space is. Saima and Fatima, you have modelled creating a safe space where people with different traditions can encounter each other in a very real, loving and embodied way. And I just want to say how extraordinarily grateful I am that there's so much feminine wisdom out there, because sometimes, you know, when you're in a church and it's all very male, you can feel on your own with thoughts like this. So thank you, and may she bless all of you abundantly, all of you. Thank you.
Bless you, Jenny. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us and for carrying Ray in your heart and your support.
Can I just say that I'm so glad you shared that, Jenny, and I'm really glad those words touched you. I have little cards that I put on my desk in front of me. I choose different, I've got different, you don't need to know all of them, but the one that I've chosen today was Baba Yaga, and she's right in front of me. It's really interesting because I needed some of her wild, ruthless energy. So I'm just really glad that you were just really an interesting connection for me, and to step into that power in that space. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
So is there anything that our contributors would like to ask each other, or continue the conversation on something that's been shared? Because I've got plenty of things to keep asking you. Or perhaps a way in could be, we get a lot of friends who come to the spaces that we hold, and also other spaces, like-minded spaces. They're always asking about accessible spiritual practices. You know, a lot of traditions have very kind of fixed ways of doing something. And, you know, Rachel, you said that you feel that Judaism and Islam is very embodied. But sometimes I feel like this can get a little rigid, that you can only pray in this way. And especially when you have bodies that perhaps can't always show up for you the way you would like to. This idea of flexibility, I feel, is so important. And I don't, you know, I'm sure it was always there in traditions, but maybe more so now, perhaps I feel the world is getting a little more rigid. How could, you know, can you share something from your tradition or your own personal experience of that flexibility within spiritual practices? For example, you know, I pray when and where I can, however I can. I've not been able to prostrate for a really long time now. I miss touching my forehead to the ground, and yet I have the memories of when I did it and didn't appreciate it. And then there are moments where I've managed to do it in between challenges in my body, and it's been so profound. And so the blessing of being able to do that. And I just feel like everybody should be able to experience and pray however they can. If there's anything that you could share to that, would be wonderful.
Very briefly, and this is not, I don't think it's a particular practice, but I just want to speak out in praise of sleep and rest when we can find it, and the hallowing of that, how holy it is. And you probably tell I'm sleep deprived all the time. So, you know, when you're sleep deprived, you think, oh gosh, if only I could sleep. But the Father Jerry Hughes, the great Jesuit spiritual writer, drawing on, you know, millennia of wisdom, says that we are made for rest. We're not made for work, actually. We are made for rest. And to just, as I did this afternoon, I had to lie down for an hour. I'm, again, sign of single person privilege, maybe. I think if I had a little wee one, they'd be sort of, you know, making me stay awake. But just to take that time and not apologize and listen to music and watch crap TV, and just that is holy. This whole reality is shot through with God's glory. Embrace it.
I love that. So hard to hear, but I really love it. Oh, Melody, you go first. I want to hear from you first, and I'll come back in.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you for that, Rachel. Important reminder. I really, a small thing, and similar to what Simon was saying, I pray in the shower, and I have a friend of mine who's also Muslim, and she was like, so you shower 5 times a day? I was like, that's not where I'm going with it. But she was saying, for me, the biggest obstacle was wuzu, the ablutions, the cleaning. And this gets to what Rachel was talking about as well. Like, you have to clean yourself and be clean. And it's like, okay, well, when the religion was established, people were a lot dirtier. Like, maybe they mean the shower was not as easily accessible. And for me, I figured one of the biggest obstacles to prayer was having to do these ablutions before it. And I found myself finding it a little unnecessary. And then when I released and opened up, not just that I can pray in different positions, but that in different directions. Like Rumi has a poem where he says, why your qibla is everywhere. Why pray just facing one direction when the beloved is everywhere, right? And just not those little rules sometimes I think stand in our way far more than they're meant to. The idea is to connect with the beloved, and if you're connecting with the beloved, that's what matters. But so many people put 15 rules before you can begin even connecting with the beloved through prayer. Not to say that that's the only way, and that's why I'm so grateful for what Rachel had to say. But just to get rid of some of those obstacles and realize for yourself that it's not a performance. It's an invitation from God, and to accept it is to accept it however works for you, you know, and that's what that has worked for me, is to use the shower. So. Robin.
Thanks, Melody. It really ties in actually with where I was going with it, and how hard that can be to be so empowered to know that you have permission to pray and be in whatever you need. Like, one, working out what it is that I need, and then knowing that I can do that is a journey. That really is. And I when Rachel was actually talking right at the beginning, I drew a box. You were talking about mutability and being in flux and precariousness. I thought so often the world gives us this box, and prayer's the same thing, like accessible spirituality is like, here's the box, right? Like, it's for us, it's prayer, it's shacharit, for example, morning prayer, and you do X, Y, and Z. It takes me a really long time to work out that I can give myself permission. And as a community rabbi, often people come to me to ask permission. Is it okay if I do X? And I feel like my job is only to say, of course it is. What do you need to do? Great, do that. That's what you should do. And then to tell myself that as well. And in Judaism, there's a practice called hitbodedut, which Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who you might know of, a Hasidic rabbi who battled with depression and really some beautiful, important writings, talked about hitbodedut and brought it into this world more. And it was an individualized, spontaneous, way of praying, which is just basically to pray for what you need. And that might be an example that he would have used was to go out into a field and scream. So often whatever I need, I make holy. This is holy. So for me, sometimes the way that I pray best is when I'm in my car and I have my music really loud, so loud it hurts, and I'm scream crying, singing to songs. And I say, this is holy. This is prayer. And then it is. I just make it prayer. That's prayer. It's holy. But it's about that permission and giving, and it's in Hebrew we say kavanah, intention. It's intentionality. Whatever we're doing, if we bring intention and we say this is holy, it's holy. In Genesis 1, Genesis 2, the creation story, God speaks and it is. The speaking is the creation. So it's holy. It's holy. Doesn't need more than that.
Oh, thank you so much, all of you. Absolutely, absolutely wonderful. Just so beautiful. And I hope that friends who are listening and may listen feel heartened to know that, yeah, everything can be prayer. Just use your intention and crank up those speakers. We are in the final 5 minutes of our time together, and I wanted to invite each of you, if you feel so moved, to share a prayer or a reflection, perhaps, that carries you through this world, something that might be with you today in the moment, or something that has been with you in the past, or something that you're holding for the future. Maybe if I could ask Rachel, Melody, and then Robin. Only if you feel you have something to share. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
I thought I'd share it's a short poem, and a poem which takes me back to an experience of many years ago now, when I'd had some major surgery and I had a deep level infection. And I don't know if you know this, but seaweed, a form of seaweed, is used to clean wounds. And it was an extraordinary discovery. And it inspired me to write this poem, which is about, I suppose, returning to earth, or very particularly returning to sea. A lesson in evolution. The specialist wants to try seaweed, feed it strand by strand into the cavern below, leave it to settle in pools, do its work among the creatures they left behind. Who knew a body was so much sea, that beneath the crust of skin there are trenches where beasts angle for prey, spark light from nothing but themselves. All life was water once. Perhaps I'll travel home, relearn the trick of gills, fin and scale, retreat from mud, 30 leagues out, silver-eyed, free at last.
Thank you for that, Rachel. I have a couplet, my favorite couplet of Maulana, I'll share with you, that is sort of my mantra through life when things get tough. It's very simple. And it is, Zar talab gashti, khud awwal zar budi, which is, my translation of it is, you went out in search of gold far and wide, but all along you were gold on the inside.
Whew. I'm going to share a blessing we say in the morning in the Jewish tradition, and I'm going to sing it actually, given that I was talking about singing before. Modeh ani lefanecha, and it translates roughly as I give thanks, God, living and eternal, for returning my soul to me with compassion. So you say it when you wake up, because the rabbis told us that sleep's a bit like death, which is great, actually, thinking about sleep, and Rachel's encouragement to have more of it, actually, to be in contact with what it is to be completely vulnerable. Anyway, and I sang this as I came out of surgery, probably also like sang my high on drugs, but I was like, in that moment, this is what came. So this is an invitation to be grateful for body and to be stepping into that as well. Moda'ani lefanecha melechai v'kayam. Moda'ani lefanecha melechai v'kayam. Moda'ani lefanecha melechai v'kayam.
Thank you. Thank you so much, your beautiful hearts, for sharing so much. Part of me wants to continue, and then another part of me is just not sure whether my heart can expand any further. Thank you so much, Rachel, Robyn, Melody, for being with us and sharing so much. Thank you for joining the Ray family. We're not going to let you go. Melody, as you can see, we've already had Robyn and Rachel come back, so that was a small print of attending. Thank you so much. And yes, God willing, we will continue this conversation, never ending.